happens when paradise feels like a cash grab? Imagine stepping off your ship onto a pier that stretches almost a half-mile into the turquoise Bahamian water. You've been told this is Carnival's answer to a competing cruise line's beloved beach resort. It looks like a postcard. The sun castle towers over a huge lagoon, palm trees sway, and signs promise paradise. Within minutes, though, you're scanning your card for a cafeteria-style lunch, your teenagers are upset they can't use their floats in the pool, and you're figuring out how to navigate a mile-wide loop with folks with mobility issues and little screaming kids. How did we get here? Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. Before you pack your flip-flops for Carnival's brand new Celebration Key, let me take you through my first visit. This is a story of contrasts, stunning views, and nickel and diming, friendly staff, and confusing policies. There's good and there's bad, like with everything in life. And I always strive with my content to give you my honest take, never sugarcoat anything, but also share with you the upside, because like I always say, even a bad day at sea is better than a good day on land. First, let's set the stage for what Celebration Key is. Carnival's marketing has promised that this $600 million development would rival Royal Caribbean's perfect day at Coco, but with a distinctly Carnival twist. Now, I couldn't help but wonder whether this new destination would deliver on these promises or leave me longing for simpler ports. Spoiler alert, I had a better time in Half Moon Cay, but we'll get to that. By the end of the day that I spent at Celebration Key, I did have that clear answer. Now, along the way, I'll share with you the things that I loved and the things that made me cringe, and also the practical tips that I wish that I had known ahead of time. And yeah, we're gonna talk about the bees. First, let's talk about this so-called island and why it actually isn't an island. When Carnival announced Celebration Key, they called it their brand new private island, and I refer it to this way on social media often too, just for simplicity. And every single time I do, you get some mansplainer that comes in and says, it's not an island. Okay, yeah, it's not a private island. It's not a private island in the sense of Half Moon Cay, Princess Cay, Coco Cay, those sorts of places. But Celebration Key sits on the southern coast of Grand Bahama Island. It's about 40 minutes from Freeport. And if you cruise a lot, you know Freeport is probably one of the most reviled cruise ports out there. But it's not Freeport, it's just close to it. The destination opened just recently in July, and it currently spans 68 developed acres out of the 379 acres that Carnival plans to build out. And as I mentioned, Carnival spent a fortune on this thing. They've spent $600 million transforming this stretch of shore into a destination that can handle up to 2 Excel-class ships at a time, with plans for a second pier to be ready in 2026. And when you're walking down that pier, again, it's really long, it's a 2,200-foot long pier. It takes sometimes 8-10 minutes just to navigate it. You will notice cranes on the horizon, and you can see it from the beach. So you can see that construction of that second pier happening. Now, my first thought was, oh my God, this place is already super overcrowded. I visited there last week aboard Carnival Sunrise, and docked alongside us was Mardi Gras, which is one of Carnival's huge Excel ships, and it was really, really overcrowded. And I cannot imagine what it would be like there with 4 ships, especially if 2 of them are Excel-class ships. It would be extremely unpleasant for me, at least until they continue expanding the space. There's just not enough space there, I don't think. So when it comes to whether or not this is an island, it's more of a private destination, or think of it as a private beach resort. It's not an island retreat at all. It's a fenced-off beach zone. It's built on an already developed island. And that matters because it shapes everything about your day, from how crowded it gets to the logistics of getting around. So why does Carnival call it a private island? Marketing, plain and simple. And they may also pivot away from that. I know Royal Caribbean for a while referred to Labadee as a private island. In fact, if you go to their website that talks about Labadee, the URL still has private island in it. It's not an island. It's on the island of Hispaniola, but it's a private beachfront area. But regardless of semantics, it's all about marketing. It's just simpler to call it a private island. Now, in contrast, you can look at Carnival's other private islands, Princess Cay and Half Moon Cay. Unlike Half Moon Cay, that is an actual private island. It's a small island owned by the cruise line. In this case, Carnival Cruise Line Corporation owns it, and it's serviced not just by Carnival Cruise Line, but the other Carnival brands. But when it comes to Celebration Key, it's not a private island, but there are neighborhoods, there are locals that live there just outside the gates and that are living their lives. Carnival leases the land and has partnered with the Bahamian government to employ more than 1,500 Bahamians. And I think that's really cool. The partnership is wonderful for the local community. It's great for travelers that are seeking more options here. But this also means you can't just wander off into nature. It also feels more touristic. It feels more like a theme park with a beach than it does on the more true private islands like Half Moon Cay. And the only way to visit here is on a Carnival ship. More than 20 ships from 10 US home ports are going to call here, so chances are high that if you want to visit Celebration Key, you can find an itinerary that's going to get you there pretty easily. Now let's talk about how to get your way around and why it feels a little, shall we say, cumbersome. Carnival took notes from Royal Caribbean. It actually feels like Coco Cay. If you've ever visited Coco Cay, you can tell that Carnival modeled Celebration Key after this. And they did this too with their design of their zones. So Carnival decided to follow that model, and they designed 5 zones that they call portals. And this is where it kind of becomes interesting. You become curious about what each portal involves, which one's the right one for you and your family, so on and so forth. And again, this is very much like Perfect Day at Coco Cay. They call theirs neighborhoods. Now, in practice, this can become a little overwhelming. I know before I visited, I was wondering, okay, where should I go? What's the difference? I had kids. Can I go to the adult-friendly areas, or there are adult-only areas? So that can feel a little bit overwhelming, but I promise it's not, and we'll break into that in a moment. But first, let's talk about the layout. When you get off that pier, that really long pier, that's gonna lead you straight down into Paradise Plaza. When you're on that pier, if you look off to the right, you'll see the beachfront area. This is the family-friendly area. Then you look over to the left, that is the more adult-friendly, but not adult-only, adult-friendly area. And I did see plenty of kids over there too. So you're walking down the pier, that takes you directly into what's called Paradise Plaza. This is Carnival's Celebration Key welcome area. This is where you'll find that towering sun-shaped arch that makes for nice photo ops. You'll see that iconic Sun Castle Tower that features dual racing water slides, which cost money. We'll talk about that. A fountain, there's live music. And you also get that first taste of nickel and diming because they do have an ice cream shop here that of course is not included. Now this plaza, think about this as the central hub or the heart of the resort. To the right, again, you'll find those family-friendly zones. To the left, that's when you're gonna find those adult-friendly zones. Now Carnival does a great job here of using signage to make it very clear how you get to each area or different portal, and if it's all ages or adult suggested. So you don't have to worry about stumbling into an area that you don't mean to. Now, if you keep walking, you'll hit Starfish Lagoon, which is on the east side. This is that family-friendly zone that has a massive freshwater pool, and this is part of that combined 275,000 square feet of lagoon space across Starfish and Calypso. And it contains about 350 million gallons. And by the way, side note, I had one of my Facebook friends talk about how on their recent visit to Celebration Key, there was a code brown, which you know what that is, don't make me say it. And I was curious, right? Usually on a code brown on a cruise ship pool, which is small when a code brown happens, which sadly is not very infrequently, they scoop it, they drain it, they clean it, they refill it. But I'm like, how do you do that in 275,000 square foot of lagoon space and 350 gallons of water? The answer is they just scoop it, and hopefully the chemicals take care of the rest. So there's your answer to that burning question, but I digress. Starfish is where you'll find the Guppy Grotto splash pad, a wading pool for little ones, sports courts, and those racing slides, which are called Flash Flamingo and the Mach 3 Marlin. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these slides, they're not free. It costs $14.99 for unlimited rides, unless you booked a package that maybe has those included, like a cabana package. And word to the wise, if you are interested in those slides, book them in advance. They sell out far in advance. I looked a couple of months before my sailing because my young daughter does like racing slides and water slides, and they were sold out. But pro tip, even if they sell out online, oftentimes you can actually buy them day of. So when we went there, even though it had been sold out months in advance, we were able to buy them on the spot. However, given that Celebration Key had just opened, they were having issues with their payment processing system and they were not able to process the payment. So we had to forego the water slides. But that's okay because the lines were long. You have to walk up you have to walk up a lot of stairs to get there. So our kids actually were not sad to miss it. The pool itself has in-water benches, there's a swim-up bar and all kinds of fun bells and whistles. Surrounding it is Starfish Beach, which is a stretch of sand with chairs and umbrellas. Now, the great thing about Celebration Key is that those loungers and those umbrellas, they are free for use. This is in contrast to places like Half Moon Cay, which is one of Carnival's other private islands that I happened to visit literally the next day after my Celebration Key video. And loungers there are free, but you have to pay 25 bucks to rent an umbrella, which I did, found to be well worth it. So the nice thing about Celebration Key is those umbrellas are provided at no cost, but it doesn't guarantee you're gonna get one. You gotta get there kind of early, you gotta post up, find a place to settle down before it gets really overcrowded. Now let's talk about the west side. Over on the west side lies Calypso Lagoon. This is the adult-friendly zone. Distinction between adult-friendly and adults-only, because Celebration Key does have both. There are some adults-only areas like Pearl Cove, but then there are adult-friendly zones. That's where they're trying to encourage more 18 plus, but they're not going to enforce it. And people still do bring their kids. Now, we tried to honor that, and we stayed on the family-friendly side because we had 6 kids under the age of 18, but not everyone does. Now, when it comes to Calypso Lagoon, this features the world's largest swim-up bar with over 160 seats and swing seats. And they have a DJ booth that's there pumping out the tunes and contributing to that party vibe. And then there is an 18 plus section on the far west side. So just kind of be cognizant of the areas where you're in. If you do have people under 18 with you, try to be respectful of the adult-friendly versus the actual adults-only areas. Because from what I've heard, Carnival has not done a great job of enforcing these things. And when children do encroach in the adults only areas, it's been kind of hit and miss as to whether or not they get booted out. Now, when it comes to Calypso Beach, this does feel more relaxed than Starfish. Yet because the Carnival labels it as adult friendly, again, you will see families here, especially near that east end. An adults only retreat requires you paying extra for access to Pearl Cove Beach Club. And more on that in a moment. Now, wedged between these two lagoons near the back is Coco Cove. This is the shopping district. Here you'll find local vendors selling crafts, art, and souvenirs. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, a really cool thing about Celebration Key is that it is a huge boon for the economy. Carnival is proud that more than 25 Bahamian businesses operate here. Now, unfortunately, when we visited, we're still working out the kinks, right? My sister tried to buy something from a vendor. They said that they didn't accept her sale and sign card because Carnival bills this as a cashless environment. Don't bring cash unless you want it for tips. Cash is not accepted here. But we all were under the assumption that it was our ship card, right? So she went to buy something and they said, we can't take your sale and sign card. And she didn't bring her credit card. So I'm not sure if that is a permanent thing that they're supposed to take your sale and sign card. I can't imagine that they wouldn't, or that was kind of the opening week's kinks and they were just having payment process issues like they were having at the water slides. So I don't know for sure on that, but either way, bring your ship card, bring a credit card just in case. But cash, not gonna work here except for tips. You'll also find in this area Sun Castle Grounds Coffee, which as a coffee lover, I love, but of course everything comes at an extra cost. Finally, at that far west end beyond Calypso sits Pearl Cove Beach Club. This is that 18 plus, not adult friendly, but actually adults only exclusive enclave. This is where you're gonna find that gorgeous infinity pool and private beach access. Now, it doesn't come cheap. There are tiers. Access costs $80 to $180 depending on the package. And as someone who doesn't drink, I am thankful that I don't have to buy the $180 package if I want to visit, because that's the one that is inclusive of all the alcohol. Packages include a lunch and open bar at the higher levels. Some include upgraded beach chairs or cabanas, and cabanas here can easily top $1,000. So from what I've heard, I didn't get a chance to visit myself because we were traveling with kids, but I've heard that Pearl Cove is the move here. That it's awesome, it's serene, it's luxurious. Unlike the other areas or portals where folks kind of have mixed feedback, including myself, I've heard almost nothing but unanimous praise for Pearl Cove, other than the cost, because it's not cheap. Pearl Cove is serene, it's luxurious, and it's separated from the rest of the resort by the lagoon. Now to get here, you gotta walk all the way around or wait for a tram. There's a lot of walking here unless you stay right at those beachfront areas right by the pier. So that's something else that you should know about Celebration Key if you're going to visit. But if I visit there again, it's adults only, I probably will pay the money to visit Pearl Cove because from everything I've seen and read, that's the move. Now, speaking of size, this can be a plus and a minus. Celebration Key, this place is absolutely massive. I gave you all the stats at the beginning of this video, it's huge. And that is a selling point. There's a lot of things to do, things to see, places to go. But it's also its Achilles heel. I will tell you that walking from the pier to Paradise Plaza alone on that really long pier takes about 6 to up to 10 minutes if you're traveling with people like we did in our group who have mobility issues and have to go a little slower. They do have trams that run, but of course you have to wait. They're limited, but they are free, which is nice. Once you're there at kind of the hub, that Paradise Plaza, you gotta figure out where you're gonna go. Pick a direction and commit. Hopefully you look at a map in advance, you watch videos like this, and you decide the best place for you to camp out for the day. Because the problem here is that these lagoons create a loop. So you can't easily get from, say, one extreme side of the property to the other without circumnavigating the entire thing. And as I mentioned, I was traveling with a large group. I had 14 family members, including 6 kids, 2 young adults, people with mobility issues, someone with a walker. So this proved challenging. So we decided to camp out in the family-friendly beach side because most of the folks wanted to do a beach day. But if you wanted to explore, which some of us did, you had to basically head all the way back to Starfish Lagoon for the kids, double back to Coco Cove if you want to visit the shops. And it's easily a mile-long loop. It's direct sun, it's a newly developed area, so there's not a lot of natural shade. It feels kind of artificial because of that, but it can be a very unpleasant walk if you're not in shape, you're not used to the heat and the humidity, and the July and August temperatures were pretty rough. But there are those complimentary trams that run continuously. But they do operate on one kind of small road that circles the resort. So you've got to walk from the tram drop still to your chosen spot. So if you're maybe out of shape or you have mobility problems or you're traveling with young kids that are hard to wrangle, keep that in mind, and you may actually use that to inform your decision to choose to stay in a portal that's closer to the pier, which is what we did. Now, when we visited, the trams were always having a line. The wait time felt longer than walking. In almost every case, my one sister that has mobility issues, she would take the tram, we would walk. We would almost always beat her to the destination. So it's not a fast process. You have to be patient. So if you're traveling with someone that does have mobility issues, keep that in mind. If you're traveling with someone who uses a wheelchair, the good news is that Carnival makes beach wheelchairs available on a first come, first served basis right there at Paradise Plaza, which is that central hub. And they do have nice smooth walkways that are wide and easy to navigate with a beach wheelchair. But visiting here, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, you gotta be prepared for a lot of walking. And if that does not appeal to you, you might not like Celebration Key. What happens is most people stop at the first lagoon they see. So what happens is the areas closest to Paradise Plaza, they fill up really early. And that's what happened. I visited with a group of 14 people. The kids were excited. One of the kids with us has only been to the beach maybe a couple of times in his life. They just wanna drop their stuff and run in the ocean. They're so excited. But I encourage folks to not do what my family did. Take time, scout out, figure out where you want to go, invest the time to walk to a further flung destination on the property. You'll find a lot more space to spread out. You'll find loungers that are together. We actually found no loungers in that overcrowded area right there to the right of the pier in the family-friendly area. So basically everyone dumped their crap in the sand, and it was very unpleasant for me because I like to keep things tidy. So keep that in mind when you're scouting out your space to go, because if you want elbow room, keep walking toward the back. That's true for Starfish Lagoon, which is the side nearest the pier. That's gonna get jam-packed. And sometimes that happens and the far end still has empty loungers. Likewise, Calypso's far west side, you're gonna find to be much more calm. Now, does it feel like a maze? A little. It can feel overwhelming. The design is intentionally circular or kind of a radial model. It's to encourage exploration. But if you have a big group, if you hate walking, you have mobility issues, you can feel like you're taking a big old hike. Now let's talk about what's for lunch and why is it so freaking complicated. Food is always a highlight for a cruise. And on cruise private islands, a lot of the private islands have really good food, including Carnival's private islands, Half Moon Cay and Princess Cay, which offer unlimited lunchtime buffets. At Half Moon Cay, for example, which I visited the day after Celebration Key, you feast on unlimited barbecue. The food is really good. The lines move quickly. There are a lot of different options, at least 3 different dessert options. They're small, but you can take as much as you want. There's fresh fruit, there's salad. It's great. At competing Royal Caribbean's Coco, they also do food really well. You can load up on tacos, you can load up on funnel cakes. It's all there at your disposal. Celebration Key, however, is not that. They take a very different approach with something that Carnival calls Island Eats. And in their marketing materials, they've done a really good job of selling it as a value add, but I tell you friends, trust me, it is not. And when it comes to my criticism of Celebration Key, this is probably my biggest pain point. So here's the gist. Every guest gets 1 complimentary fast casual meal or 25% off of an entree at a full service restaurant. After that, everything is a la carte, meaning you pay for it. Now, when I read that before the trip, I kind of shrugged. And again, Carnival has done a great job of saying, oh, we have all these great food options. Look at these great variety and all of this stuff. And it's like, okay, 1 free meal, that's sufficient. Who needs more than 1 free meal? But in reality and in practice, you do start to feel like you're nickeled and dimed. Now, what happened with us is we went to the Captain's Galley Food Hall. This is located in Starfish Lagoon. This is the family-friendly area. This is kind of set up cafeteria style. And in contrast to other cruise line private islands, including Carnival's own private islands, this is not, I repeat, this is not that all-you-can-eat buffet. What happens is you kind of line up cafeteria style, you get a tray, and your choices are pretty limited here. Things like pizza, burgers, and chicken tenders. Each plate comes with fries and a cookie. So you grab your tray, pick your food, you go to a checkout line, basically, where a worker scans your sail and sign card, and they give you a cookie. That's it. There's no salads, there's no options other than fries, there's limited options. It's pretty limited, and it is cafeteria style. And once you scan your card, that counts as your 1 free meal for that day. So if you get your food, you don't like it, your hamburger's undercooked, you can't just go back and grab another. If you have picky kids and they're like, I don't like this, you can't go get another. If you're traveling with kids that are derps like mine and they drop their chicken tenders, you can't just go back and get more. You've burned your free meal for the day. And additional meal options are expensive. They're like 14 bucks. So you gotta pay full price if you want anything other than that 1 meal. And the meal itself is very lackluster. I would say nothing there was bad. Between our big group, I did sample a little bit of everything in the name of science. Nothing was bad. Nothing was bad at all. The pictures look unappealing. When I've shared them on social media, people are like, ooh, gross, that looks disgusting. It was not by any means disgusting. It wasn't even bad, but it surely wasn't good. It was fine. It's like cafeteria food. The cookie, I will say, the cookie is very, very good. So kudos for that, Carnival. Now, another quibble I have with the food hall is seating. Seating is outdoor picnic tables. There's limited shade. They kind of have these crisscrossing shades above, and probably only about 60% of the seating options are shaded, maybe 70%. and it gets very, very crowded. As I mentioned, we were there on a day where it was our smaller ship along with an Excel mega ship, which is Carnival Mardi Gras, and there was very limited shade. And on top of that, you've got the bee issues. Bees are gonna buzz around the areas where there's sugary stuff, like the soda fountains, and that is in the food hall. So we kind of got ran out of certain areas because of bees as well. So that's another bit of an issue with the food hall. My other big issue with the food hall, and this is a big, big issue I have with Carnival, and it makes them come across like a bunch of greedy scumsuckers, is the only complimentary beverage that you get when you visit Celebration Key is a small paper cup of tap water that you get yourself from dispensers. At the other private islands, Half Moon Cay, Princess Cay, you get things like the tropical punch juice, you get the lemonade, you get the tea. Not here, just tap water in a little cup. So bring your refillable water bottle so you can stay hydrated, because even filling it yourself requires a wait in a line. Anything else, you gotta pay for it. Of course, because it's called Celebration Fee for a reason, which is the sad nickname that it's gotten because of things like this. And if you wanna buy a beverage, even something like a bottled water, a Dasani runs $3. You're gonna pay an additional 18% required built-in gratuity plus a 10% VAT, which is a required tax that is required by the local authorities. That's gonna be added to every single beverage, not just alcohol beverages, but even bottled water and even things like soda. So if you want something different, make sure you bring your card. You can use it at the different full-service restaurants, but you're going to have to pay. Now, my recommendation when it comes to the food, if you're traveling with a family or a big group, or you don't want to take a big hike around that circular island to seek out something different, stay at the food hall. The food hall is fine. The food's fine. There's not much shade area. There is a little bit of a bee problem. The food is okay. It's more convenience. If you want something nicer, something tastier, take the hike and go visit the other options, either the food trucks or the full service restaurants. In these areas, you're gonna find more variety and higher quality food, according to what I've read from other cruisers that have visited these places. This includes things like jerk chicken, coconut shrimp, seafood baskets, smoked meats, all of these things. Now, some of these things cost extra, but there are food trucks. They're not actually trucks, they're just booths designed to emulate and look like food trucks. But there you do get one free island eat meal. There you'll find things like Grand Bahama Taco Company, Flippin' Fritters, fried conch, mini donuts, and things like that. So some of these food options are included, some are not. So make sure that you're partaking from an island eat spot, because that's where you're gonna swipe your card, get your one free meal. But there are other things a la carte at extra cost that you can buy as well. And yes, there is, as I mentioned, an ice cream shop in Paradise Plaza and that coffee bar in Lacono Cove, but those, again, come at a cost, even if you have the drink package, because the drink package does not work here. If this sounds confusing, you are not alone. Carnival's brand ambassador, John Heald, has acknowledged on Facebook that many guests have complained about that one meal limit. Now, he works for Carnival, great guy, he needs a raise, trust me, but he is a company shill, so he's gonna defend the policy, which he did, basically kind of quipping back, well, when do you get meal credits in Cozumel? He does kind of have a point. At most ports of call, you do pay for your lunch, unless you go and pay to visit an all-inclusive resort like Paradise Beach in Cozumel. But, John, the difference here, this is marketed as a private destination, the equivalent of a private island. And most cruisers are gonna compare it to their experiences at other cruise line private islands, including your own Carnival, Half Moon Cay and Princess Cay, where food is buffet style, unlimited, all you can eat. So what happens is people come here, they have a little bit of a shock because it's just so contradictory to all of their other experiences, especially if they've cruised before or they're frequent cruisers. So I think that's the distinction. And there's also the difference where you get a cup of tap water versus free juices that you have at the other areas. And to add insult to injury, the drink package that you paid for to use on the ship doesn't work here. And again, that is the case at Half Moon Cay and Princess Cay. Carnival is one of the few cruise lines that does not allow you to use your drink package on their private islands, whereas other cruise lines do. So you can cruise MSC, you can cruise Royal Caribbean, and your drink package works on their private islands, but not with Carnival. So Carnival's already one step behind the competition here, and this I think puts them one step further. So my advice with food, unless you need it for convenience sake, avoid the food hall, take the hike, and go to one of the food trucks. There are gonna be lines, because that food is better, people know that, but if you want good food, you gotta walk to it and you gotta wait in line. My advice to Carnival, just make the food hall food all you can eat. It can't cost you that much, it possibly can't cost you that much. And then the nicer things like Island Eats, just charge for it or give people one swipe of a card. There has to be a better way, because I personally don't like this approach either, but I'm curious what you think. Now let's talk about the shining star of Celebration Key, which is that lagoon. Celebration Key's lagoons, they are truly the stars of the show. The two pools are 8 times the size of Royal Caribbean's Oasis Lagoon. The water is crystal clear, the bottom is soft and padded, so you don't have kind of that rough concrete, which is great if you have kids. It's kind of that ocean entry, it's surrounded by sand, so you feel like you're basically at the beach, and you don't have to worry about spraying your feet off as much. So you basically have that nice entry in there. There are in-water loungers, there's swings, there's benches, and again, you can even pay to rent aquabanas, which are inflatable party platforms. So the lagoon is absolutely beautiful. The beach at Celebration Key is also beautiful. I mean, you're in the Bahamas. Come on, you can't go wrong with the beach in the Bahamas. But I will say, as someone who frequents Bahamian beaches, the beach here is not as good as the other ones. Again, I visited Half Moon Key the day after Celebration Key, and it was a stark difference. The water at Celebration Key is definitely rockier. I actually would recommend maybe bringing water shoes if you're wanting to spend a day on the beach here, because there is a lot of rock. There's some seaweed, which is usually not the case at a lot of other Bahamian beaches, and the sand is much rougher and rockier as well. So if you're visiting here, you got sensitive feet, you're gonna do a beach day, bring your water shoes, which is not usually the case at other Bahamian beaches. But still, it's a nice beach day. But my quibble here, it's the floaties. Before our cruise, I read conflicting reports about whether or not personal flotation devices were allowed. Carnival's own FAQ at one point said that guests can bring small personal floaties and snorkel gear and stuff like that. But at the lagoon entrance, there's signage that indicates that outside floats are not permitted. So there's all kinds of confusion, which is not to be unexpected, right? Because this is just opened. But recently, I saw John Heald himself, again, he's Carnival's brand ambassador, post a comment that specifically said, basically, sorry for the confusion, but no, outside floats are not allowed in the lagoon and the pool. And that's a bummer for me, because to enjoy a pool day, I want a float. Now, we use them in the ocean. We used our snorkel gear in the ocean, so apparently that's not a big deal. I would not imagine Carnival would try to dictate what people do in the ocean, but you can't use them in the pools. Now, that leaves you with the option of either going without it, doing a beach day in the ocean, which people might not always want to do, either because they don't like the ocean, they're scared of it, there's seaweed, stuff like that, especially here where it is prone for like a little more seaweed. But the only other option you have is to rent a float from Carnival. They actually created a lot of controversy before they opened Celebration Key because they had a pool noodle, yes, a basic pool noodle you can go to the dollar store and get for a couple bucks. They were renting them out. They have the audacity to rent them out for 20 bucks a day. After lots of social media backlash, thankfully they rethought that poor decision and they repriced it, but it's still $10.99, which I think is ridiculous. If you want to rent a pool mat, that's even more expensive. And those aquabanas to rent for your group are significantly more expensive, hundreds of dollars. So I understand they're working out the kinks, right? They're gonna play around with different prices. Prices are gonna change, but it has created some early confusion and frustration for Carnival. But as someone who does love floating in a pool, I think this is a real miss. I'm not gonna pay 11 bucks to rent some crusty pool noodle that people have ridden in the pool, ew, and also what a waste of money. So I do hope that Carnival rethinks this one. They have indicated that they're open to change. They have already made some changes, some for better, some for worse. But Carnival, I implore you, rethink your floaty policy, please. And then just so I have it right, I want to read for you verbatim what John Heald himself said. He said, "There has been some confusion about this, for which I apologize. I'm afraid that the answer to this is no, with regard to the use of floaties in the pools. For children under 2 years of age, only U.S. Coast Guard approved personal flotation devices may be used in the pools with adult supervision. All other personal floaties and noodles are not allowed in the lagoon or the pools." So that statement, at least for me, or at least until they change it again, makes it clear that at least for now, you can't bring your floats at all. And here's another surprise that has kind of caught some cruisers unaware. And this actually applied to our group as well, because we were traveling with a 20-year-old. You must be 21 years old to purchase alcohol at Celebration Key, even though the legal drinking age in the Bahamas is 18. And because Carnival's Cheers drink package does not work on the island, every daiquiri or beer you order comes with that 18% gratuity and a 10% VAT on top of an already inflated price. My sister bought a daiquiri from a bar at Celebration Key, and it was a small strawberry daiquiri, and it cost $12.50, plus that required 18% gratuity fee and that 10% VAT. So that made her drink cost over $16. So if you're a drinker, that cost adds up really fast. And in her case, she also bought the drink package. So to add insult to injury, she had spent hundreds of dollars on a drink package. Then she's paying basically 15, 16 bucks a drink on the island for a small drink. And even the base price of drinks on Celebration Key are higher than the drink prices on the ship. So this is very much not a place for drinkers unless you pay up the money to go to a place like the adult-only Pearl Cove area. Now, people jokingly are calling this celebration fee, but not everything comes at a cost. I do appreciate that there are some complimentary amenities like beach chairs and loungers, umbrellas, and freshwater showers. And in theory, that sounds wonderful, but in practice, our group struggled to find a cluster of chairs together. So if you're a solo traveler or just a couple, you're probably not gonna have a hard time. Now with us, because we're wrangling a lot of kids, it's hard for us to get off the ship early, and Mardi Gras actually beat us there, and that's a mega ship. And because we disembarked a little later than planned, almost all of those free loungers, even remotely near kind of the early entrance part, both at the beach and the pool, were already taken. So if you want a shaded spot or an area to store your stuff, or you're traveling with a big group, or you have folks with mobility issues like we did, my advice to you is to get off the ship as early as you can, determine in advance the chosen portal where you want to spend your day, and go as far back in that portal as you possibly can. But understand, you're either gonna have to hoof it and walk there, and it's not gonna be necessarily close to the ship, or you're gonna have to wait and take a tram. And then even from the tram where you get dropped off, you still have to walk there. The other option is, of course, to pony up the money and to rent a daybed or a cabana, but these are very expensive, costing several hundred, if not several $1,000s for the really large ones. Now, another issue I have in terms of amenities is that Carnival touts their showers as a free amenity. It's a pretty basic thing. I think everyone should offer that, but there definitely were not enough foot rent stations. We couldn't find one close to the beach or the pier at all. My sister had to walk a pretty good distance just to rinse off sand, and then by the time she got back, she already had sand back on her feet, basically, even from the road area. So that was a little bit of an issue, and I just decided I'm gonna like brush off what I can with the towel and just have sandy feet, which is uncomfortable, but whatever. So I do hope that Carnival will add more foot washing stations as time goes on, as they continue to develop Celebration Key. Now let's talk about the cost of Paradise and what is worth paying for. Carnival's pricing model at Celebration Key seems designed to basically test you in terms of how much you're willing to spend for the sake of comfort and convenience. Again, those water slides, $15 for unlimited rides. Buy them in advance because they sell out, but you may be able to get them day of. Cabanas, they start around $1,000 and can exceed $2,000 for the ultra luxe over water villas. Daybeds, aquabanas, also an extra cost. Pearl Cove access. Remember, Pearl Cove is that adults only, not adult friendly. This is actually legit adults only, the adults only area. They come in tiers. The lowest tier is $80. The highest tier is all inclusive, including alcohol. That's gonna be about $180. Lockers are gonna cost you extra, and there is a real absence of lockers right now. I know Carnival plans to add more, but basically everything's gonna come at a fee. And if you do choose to splurge on Pearl Cove, you will get access to that adults only setting, the infinity pool, the premium lounger, more exclusive, less crowded space, and that open bar. It is a stunning space. The loungers are beautiful. The umbrellas are beautiful and retro styled. It's beautifully landscaped, and it does feel exclusive. But it just depends on your budget and your willingness to spend when you're on a cruise, because if you're traveling with a few people, that cost can add up pretty quick. Now, personally, because I had a group of 14 people, and again, we had folks with mobility issues, we had kids, we had young adults, we had a variety of people, we decided to skip the paid extras because we also like to ball on a budget. We still had a great time. That lagoon was awesome, but I wish I could have had a float. The free chairs, they were fine. Not enough of them. Toward the later part of the day, when people started to go back to the ship, we were able finally to snag 3 chairs together, and the 14 of us just split them. Some people would lounge a little bit, but we had a place to keep our stuff up out of the sand. But there are constant reminders here of what you can't access without paying for. Those roped off cabanas, the exclusive bars, the adults only Pearl Cove, and that kind of undermines that relaxing vibe, as does the overcrowded nature of the area itself. In contrast, at Half Moon Cay, there are also cabanas for rent and cocktails for purchase, but that line between free and paid, it just, for some reason, I don't know, it feels less intrusive. Here, that dividing line feels more like literal barriers of the haves and the have-nots. Now, it's worth noting that Carnival's investment also does benefit local business. As I mentioned at the start of this video, over 24 Bahamian partners operate shops and stalls and straw markets and things like that. They have a really awesome cultural Junkadoo parade and live music right there at Paradise Plaza, really infusing that genuine culture. So those elements are awesome and they deserve praise. So kudos for that, Carnival. They also hire local staff. I found the staff to be very friendly, very eager and hospitable in helping the guests. So this infusion of authentic Bahamian culture is especially welcome because, as I mentioned, Freeport, the nearest major city and cruise port destination on the island, has long been regarded as one of the least popular cruise ports among cruisers. So getting cruisers a reason to come to Grand Bahama Island, whereas normally they try to avoid Freeport, and to spend money at Celebration Key, that's a win for the local economy. And that's pretty cool. So while prices may be high, at least some of it stays in the local community. Now let's talk about the bees. About those bees. All right, so in the weeks after Celebration Key opened, which has still just been a few weeks, social media has been buzzing, and there have been videos circulating of bees swarming soda fountains and bar areas. Now, if you're allergic to bees, this is particularly important. I will say there is a bee issue, but I will say it's a little bit overblown. During our visit, we did notice clusters of bees, but it was mostly around the soft drink machines and the things like the swim up bars. It was certainly not apocalyptic. I mean, at one time, maybe I counted 8 or 9 bees. And I do know if you have an allergy, that's a big deal. But for most of us, you know, it's an annoyance at most, right? And it did make some folks in our group, especially the kids, uncomfortable. So at one point we were trying to eat in the food hall. We were kind of close-ish to the beverage station, but that was the only seat we could grab because, again, overcrowding is a problem here. But we had to get up and vacate and go try to find someplace else because the bees were very annoying. Now, Carnival is aware of the bee issue. So again, there is a bee issue, but it's mostly concentrated to the soft drink and the alcohol beverage areas. So steer clear of those and you'll be fine. Carnival is aware of it though. John Heald, Carnival's brand ambassador, acknowledged this on July 23rd and promised that island management is aware and taking care of this accordingly. In subsequent posts, he's mentioned that the team has been working with local experts to relocate hives away from guest areas and to adjust trash and syrup storage to reduce attractants. So by the time you visit, hopefully the bee situation is better. I will say we visited within 2 weeks of opening and it was not terrible. I've seen other bee situations at other swim up bars and things, so it's not like it's exclusive to Celebration Key or specifically a Carnival problem. It's just something that you can come to expect at any place that has sugary things and a Caribbean climate, because bees are everywhere and bees are a good thing. Now let's talk about the big comparison, the elephant in the room. How does Celebration Key compare to Perfect Day at Coco Cay? Now, I've heard people again jokingly refer to Celebration Key both as Celebration Fee, because of all the nickel and diming and price gouging, which I think is a legit criticism. But they've also referred to it as the Wish or the Teemu version of Perfect Day at Coco Cay, which is Royal Caribbean's massively popular private island destination. As someone who has visited both, including Coco Cay several times, of course, my first thought was to compare and contrast them. Because the minute you get off the ship and you're on that long pier and you have the crisscrossy kind of overhead sail things and you see that arched entrance, it feels like you're at Perfect Day at Coco Cay. Although calling it the Wish version of Coco Cay is a little cheeky, I think it's a fair comparison, so let's unpack it. Royal Caribbean spent $250 million turning a simple beach stop in the Bahamas to a resort-style destination that spans about 120 acres. So if you visited Coco Cay, like the portals, they feature neighborhoods like Chill Island, South Beach, Oasis Lagoon, and Thrill Water Park. Sounds familiar, right? And at Perfect Day at Coco Cay, there are basic beach zones, Chill Island, Harbor Beach, South Beach, and the massive Oasis Lagoon pool are completely free. Now, Royal Caribbean does have some upcharge areas like their Thrill Water Park, but that features 13 slides, including the tallest in North America, a 1,600-foot zip line, and their helium balloon ride up and away. So if you see pictures of Coco Cay, that's kind of that distinctive thing that you always see that catches your eye, and the exclusive Coco Beach. But here's the crucial difference. Not only do they have a whole lot more bells and whistles included with their water park, although it costs money as well, but you're getting more bang for your buck there. The crucial difference is at Perfect Day at Coco Cay, all of the island's buffets and snack shacks are unlimited. You get burgers, tacos, salads, mozzarella sticks, funnel cakes, ice cream, all of these things. Even the signature Coco Loco cocktails are included if you have Royal Caribbean's drink package. There's no meal credit to track. You don't have to bring your ship card around and swipe it. If you get something you don't like it, you don't have to worry, oh, I burned my one free meal of the day. And this really matters, especially if you're traveling with picky eaters or kids or like me with big groups. The other big distinction, and this is huge, is that Royal Caribbean's drink package also works on the island. So you're not paying extra for cocktails. You've already bought the package, your soft drinks, all of these things are included. In contrast, Celebration Key, your drink package does not work. And on top of that, adding insult to injury, every beverage has that 18% required gratuity plus that 10% required VAT. So that distinction, that price difference can be huge, especially if you're a big drinker. Coco Cay's layout also spreads across a much larger area. I have never felt Coco Cay was overcrowded, whereas Celebration Key, it felt absolutely overcrowded. But even when you're visiting Coco Cay's areas closer to the pier, you can really find a secluded area if you walk farther away to reach South Beach or Hideaway Beach, because there you're gonna have that space to spread out without the crowds. And like I said, I've never felt that Coco Cay was overcrowded. Celebration Key, in contrast, again, felt super overcrowded. Their circular or radial design around those lagoons is meant to keep guests within that one loop, and that can make it, again, difficult to navigate and make those central areas feel really, really crowded. Another thing about Coco Cay is that their family zones and adult zones, they coexist without strict barriers. They have Hideaway Beach, it's 18 plus and costs extra, but there is no equivalent of being told that you can't sit in the far pool without paying. For thrill seekers, Perfect Day clearly wins with all of the things that they have to do and its massive array of activities. Now, Celebration Key's dual slides, they're fun, but there's just absolutely no comparison. Now, one area where Celebration Key has the upper hand are the lagoons. Truly stunning. Celebration Key lagoons are 8 times larger than Oasis Lagoon, and as I noted earlier in this video, they have those soft padded floors and that in-water seating. So if you're looking for a pool day, but remember, no floaties allowed unless you rent them, Celebration Key for the win. Now, another key difference here is value. Carnival positions itself as the fun cruise line and the budget-friendly, family-friendly cruise line. And they've always touted lower base fares. Royal Caribbean, not significantly more expensive than Carnival typically, if you're looking at apples to apples comparison of ship class, but their fares are a little bit higher. But once you're at Coco Cay, you're going to enjoy a lot of savings versus Celebration Key. You get unlimited food, you get to use your drink package, and when you factor in all the things that you might spend there, especially if you have kids who like to eat a lot, or if you are a heavy drinker and you don't want to incur extra costs like float rentals, you actually might find an apples to apples, dollars to dollars comparison. Even though your Royal Caribbean fare is more expensive than Carnival, it's going to balance out because you're going to spend so much less at a day at Perfect Day at Coco Cay compared to a day at Celebration Key. Now, if you want a real comparison, consider this. For roughly the cost of one Pearl Cove package, which is $180 for an adult, all food included, all drinks included, you could instead pick an itinerary to Nassau, Bahamas, spend the day at Breeze's Resort, which is an all-inclusive resort and much less crowded in general than Celebration Key, but I would say pretty comparable to Pearl Cove. That's $100 a day. And at Breeze's, you're gonna get a pool, a beach, a bar experience. Not as nice as the lagoons of Celebration of Key, of course, but in a much more intimate setting and without the crowds and that nickel and diming. So for me, I personally will not seek out Celebration Key for future itineraries. I would prefer to spend a day at an all-inclusive resort like Breeze's in Nassau, or even one of the many all-inclusive resorts that are located in Cozumel, Mexico. Now let's talk about the loyalty factor, because I will say that my complicated feelings about Celebration Key are inseparable from my history with Carnival. I have been a big fan. I always jokingly refer to myself as Carnival's #1 fan. I love the fun ships. I've got platinum status, on my way to diamond, and I've been a little bit of a defender of Carnival against critics a lot, although I've always been willing to also call them out when they're on some BS. Earlier this summer, as you probably know, Carnival made changes to its VIFP loyalty program, basically completely devaluing benefits for their most loyal longtime cruisers. And then on top of that, I've had a bad run of not great quality of food and service on older ships when cruising on Carnival, and I've sailed 3 of them in the last few months. My recent experiences in particular on Carnival Spirit and on Sunrise, and Sunrise is where I visited Celebration Key, really have left me a little soured on Carnival's food and service. It feels like Carnival food and service is on the decline, but their costs, both fares and all of the extraneous things. So the value proposition for me is starting to really be unbalanced. And then when you add in the Celebration Key nickel and diming to those frustrations, the loyalty glow really starts to fade. That's why I recently canceled an upcoming Carnival cruise and I booked Royal Caribbean's Utopia of the Seas instead. Now, I'm not personally giving up on Carnival completely. I love their Excel class ships. I love their food options on Excel class ships. I love Guy's Burgers and lava cakes and the fun. But I will say these recent experiences, including Celebration Key, which honestly really just left a sour taste in my mouth as a whole, has left me diversifying my cruise portfolio. I have to be honest, Celebration Key, it's beautiful. The lagoon, breathtaking. The local staff, delightful. Those cultural touches, absolutely lovely. My family made priceless memories there. It's stuff we'll never forget. I don't want this to come across as a negative review because it's not. This is just an honest take. There's a lot of great things about Celebration Key. However, it's an honest guide for anyone who's visiting soon, especially longtime Carnival cruisers who have experience with Half Moon Cay and Princess Cay, who have come to expect those things, who have maybe noticed the noticeable decline in food and service with Carnival lately, or have cruised other cruise lines and are comparing it to MSC's Ocean Key, or Royal Caribbean's Perfect Day at Coco Cay, both of which are gems in the cruising world. This just means being open about the good and the bad and sharing a few honest tips. Now, when it comes to those tips, if I were to sum it up, first, expect to walk. This resort, it's huge. That loop design means you're either walking long distances or you're waiting in line for the tram. Make sure you wear comfortable shoes, bring water shoes because the water is rocky and the beach in the sand is rough, and bring sun protection. We didn't do the best job with this as a family, and a lot of us ended up being pretty crispy critters. Plan in advance what zone you want to visit, or portal you want to visit, look at the map and make a decision. And also do some advanced planning for your meal, because you don't want to burn your one meal at the food hall in comparison to the food trucks, which are far superior. And that's what makes this not a relaxing experience. You kind of got to plan ahead, whereas I like to roll off a ship, just walk where my feet take me, a shorter distance, and have a nice day at the beach or at a pool. Make sure you sit away from soda dispensers. Make sure you avoid the swim up bars if you're allergic to bees or bees really bother you, because that will be a problem in those areas. And make sure you visit places early, like do your lunch early, get off the ship early if you want to avoid the overcrowding, which is definitely a problem here. Now note that policies may evolve as Carnival responds to feedback, and John Heald has already indicated that Carnival is reviewing things like the floaty rules and some of the other complaints. But as a business professor, I find Carnival's strategy pretty fascinating. They're trying to create a revenue-generating resort while balancing guest satisfaction. It seems like a high-stakes experiment in brand loyalty, and now is not the time for Carnival to be testing brand loyalty because it ticked us off. Now, for my group, the constant sense of paying for every little thing and paying handsomely for it, it really just diminished the joy of a beach day. And that's the beautiful thing about private islands. I always tell cruisers, private islands are wonderful because you get a free and relaxing beach day. Celebration Key, that's not it. It's certainly not free, hence the term celebration fee. Nor, in my experience, is it particularly relaxing. But I want to know what you think. Have you visited Celebration Key? Seen a lot of mixed reviews, but I want to know, am I on the mark or did I miss it completely? I can take it. Drop your comments down below and let's talk ship.